The Holy Family. Let's talk about something else. That's what a lot of people would say. Family? Don't talk to me about family. I'll tell you about family. I think lots of us probably have family stories, and some of them may not be so pleasant. We know lots of families, especially at family times of the year, like Christmas and Easter and Thanksgiving, that try to do everything that they can to stay as far away from each other as possible. Because if they get too close, World War III may happen. You know, there are oftentimes rifts in families that have never healed. Some of those rifts in families, as a matter of fact, have been nursed and cultivated so that they seem to get deeper and wider rather than drawing closer. And so when we get to this annual feast of the Holy Family of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, there are many people who say, I don't want to hear about it. Tell me something else. But we have to hear about it because we are family. And just like some of our fractured families, we can be fractured at times as well. After all, if we had a chance to all get up and say what our idea of church is, we might find all sorts of different kinds of ideas. Church is this, or church is this, or church should be this, or church should be that. And there are often times that people kind of argue and bicker even about their family of God. But we are called to holiness. We are called to be a holy family. It's not easy. It can be painful. But we must strive to do so. Even the Holy Family had problems, as I always remind us. And after all, they started in a very bad light. They had to be uprooted and go to Bethlehem because of a census, even though Mary was due, and I mean due. And yet they had to travel to get to Bethlehem. And when they got there, there was no room for them in an inn. They had to go to one of the places where the animals were kept. And there in a manger, Jesus was placed after his birth. And then you would think now that the Son of God is here on earth, all things would be changed and different and wonderful. A short time later, a couple of years later, an angel tells them to hightail it out of Dodge because Herod wants to kill the child. We celebrated that this morning at Mass on the Feast of the Holy Innocents. And so they had to be displaced yet again in fear and trepidation because the king wanted to take their son. And as a matter of fact, when the king found out that he wasn't going to get the kid, he ordered all the children 2 years of age and under to be slaughtered just to make sure that he got the newborn king, not realizing that Joseph and Mary were warned by an angel and they were out of town. They were in Egypt. And then they came back and they began a very tenuous life. And at the age of 12, we hear about Jesus staying behind in Jerusalem. And a lot of people, often say, well, they must have been pretty poor parents. How could you not know that your kid is not traveling with you? But Jesus was at that perfect age. He was at the age where he could travel with one or the other, because the women and the men often traveled separately. And Jesus, being 12, could travel with his mother if he wanted, or could travel with his father if he wanted, with the women folk or with the men folk. And I'm sure that as they were on their way back home, each of them thought that Jesus was with the other until they had a chance to meet up. Hey, how's Jesus doing? Well, I don't know. Don't you have him? Oh, I don't have him. Didn't you have him? And they had to go back to Jerusalem. And they found him in the temple. Son, how could you do this to us? Didn't you know I have to be about my Father's business? And then he came back home with them. Jesus, as he continued to grow and develop, became a very famous teacher and preacher. And they heard that people wanted to kill him. Again, more fear. The family may not have been perfect in that regard, but they were perfect in the fact that their love for one another kept them together. Just as our love for one another needs to keep us together. In the first reading, we heard that that love sometimes needs to be a love that forgives. You know, oftentimes when we hear love, we think, oh, peachy keen and hunky-dory and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes love is tough. Sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes we have to forgive when we don't want to. Sometimes we have to allow the other to have their way just so that we could have some peace. There's a lot of give and take in being family, but it's worth the price. We pray today for families of all kinds, for fractured families, for intact families, for families to be, and for families who grieve the loss of others. All of us are called to be perfected in love. And as we celebrate this feast of the Holy Family of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, we ask God to give us the grace that we need to be as holy a family as possible.